Hi, it's Liz Hirsh Naftali, and welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. I'm super excited because today I'm speaking with the former mayor of Bal Harbour, Gabe Groisman. We've never met in person, and if we were in person, we would be having coffee together because it's the Capital Coffee Connection. But we are having virtual coffee, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And one of the things for me about this podcast is talking to people that are from all different places, coming from different perspectives, but at the end of the day, talking about heart, humanity, and home. And one of the things for me, Gabe, when I was thinking about who you are and I was doing a little research, all of a sudden I got to this picture of this guy who's got amazing qualifications, done so much, but it was you, your wife, and 5 beautiful daughters. And I wanted to start by saying that, that was the first thing. And that was that stuck with me about really who you are, is this husband and dad. And so I know that we're a mayor and you're doing a lot of incredible things, but I just wanted to tell everybody that is listening and that is joining us that that's really a big part of who you are. So I want to say thank you, and we'll get talking a little bit about all the things you've done, but we're not going to talk about politics and policy. We're going to talk about who you are as a leader and as a person. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I love the opportunity.
Great. So I'd love to just start with what it means. And I talk about this with each leader, like what it means to be a mayor. Because when you are a mayor, you're a mayor for everybody. And you also are the day-to-day person that most people need to lead in their lives.
Yeah, so being a mayor is very interesting. It's actually very different than most other political positions. You'll hear mayors say we're closest to the people, and it's true. And it might not always be, and most of the time, it's not that we're deciding things. There are these things that would be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, but there are things that are going to impact you immediately, right? So whether it's fixing your streets or your traffic lights or picking up your garbage or keeping you safe, which has turned out to be a real critical component for mayors, making sure, because mayors oversee their police departments almost all the time, including in my small city, still had our own police department. So that's really the first thing. And these days with the political divide in our society, people want to ascribe different things to the mayors, but it's very funny. And I've been out of office for just over 2 years now. And when you're a mayor, you have friends that are mayors all over the country. So kind of you go to the same conferences, the same events, and you relate, by the way, no matter what size the city, but also no matter what party you are, no matter what race, religion, and we're all like, there's this whole sort of mayor brotherhood that goes on. And it's kind of hard to explain from the outside. It might even look cheesy, like, why do you guys get along so well? But it's because we kind of understand what it's like to be really responsive to the people, but also to decide a policy that you want to put forward for your city, that you get passed by your city council, and putting it forward sometimes despite the loudest voices, because that's always a big tension in local politics.
And I think that what you've just described, I was thinking about like how you're there to serve all the people, and it doesn't matter if they're a Democrat, an independent, or Republican, they're your constituents. And I like how you brought it to the point of like your relationship with all the mayors across our country. And I don't know, how many mayors are there? Do you remember how many mayors are across the United States?
No, there's thousands.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your area, Bal Harbour, Florida. What makes people in your area in the state of Florida special?
Yeah, so look, I was basically born and raised in Florida. I actually was born in D.C., but moved to Florida when I was 3 years old. It's actually a new concept here, apparently, in South Florida, because so many people have come here in the last 5 years. It's like a whole new city, which, by the way, I welcome. I think it's a lot of fun having grown up here, kind of to see a new energy come to the city. But South Florida in particular, I could speak about. It's very unique. Many of us, if not most of us, come from somewhere else. Our families are from Latin America primarily. I'll give you an example. So my family's from Argentina. I'm first generation American. I went to a religious Jewish day school, and most people would be very surprised to know that we all spoke Spanish in school. I mean, all of our friends, you go to your friends' houses, it was only Spanish that was spoken. It was Jews from Argentina and Colombia and Mexico and Guatemala and Costa Rica. I mean, anywhere you can think of, Peru, that is what South Florida is. And it's not just us, of course. There's a large Cuban community, large broader Argentinian community that's here, the Haitian community, and everyone's sort of mixed together, and it makes it a real special place for various reasons. One of which is that we don't have as many of the crazies here than you have around the country on all sides or on any side. It's just sort of like everybody's here to work and to build a community, and everybody really rose in the same direction. Of course, everybody's with an asterisk. We could be intellectually honest about it. It's not everybody all the time, but that is the way the current goes here. And then if you zoom into Bal Harbour, Miami-Dade County, when people say Miami, they're really talking about the county, which is about 3 million people, 3.2 million people. It's 34 municipalities, broken up into 34 municipalities with 34 different mayors, plus the county mayor. So all these cities are different. All of them are pretty small, actually, including Bal Harbour, less than 10,000 people. But this is where I live with my family. I moved back here after law school and came back here in 2006, straight to Bal Harbour. And it's, from where I sit, it's the nicest place you can live in South Florida, where you want to have a family. There's other nice, beautiful islands that aren't really family friendly. If you come to our neighborhood on a weekend, you'll see dozens and dozens of kids riding their bikes and scooters, and the parents just hanging out outside, drinking coffee, barefoot on the grass. Literally, I mean, that's what it is here, and we're just steps away from the beach. So it's a real special little pocket, and I'm proud to call it home.
I love that. I mean, especially now, it's just to be in a place where the weather is decent, it's warm, and you're outside. I think that's it's a quality of life. And when you're raising a family, you always take into consideration what the environment's like. And for you to have grown up there and it was wonderful, and now for your kids to grow up there and it's wonderful, it's very special. What got you to run for mayor? What was it that inspired you?
So it's interesting. I used to get asked that question a lot, and usually people think, because I got then involved in lots of global matters, I kind of took the title mayor into different aspects that I was very passionate about. So they assumed that that's why I ran for mayor, ran first for city council, but it couldn't be further from the truth. There were really small city issues that were happening, ordinances that were being proposed that came to my attention, to everyone's attention, on really silly things. These are the kind of things that had come up in cities: playgrounds in the front yard, utilities, beach issues, things that happen in cities. I was a litigator at that point for like 12, 13 years. I've been a lawyer now for almost 20 years. And I just went to the city hall for the council meeting. I had never been to one. And honest to God's truth, I hear them talking. I hear them analyzing these things. And I said, there's no way that these are the people deciding what's going to happen in my life, to my family, and to my in-laws that live here, my sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws. We have cousins and lots of family. Like, these are the guys deciding. I hated the dynamic of getting 2 minutes in front of them to speak and try to convince them. I said, I'm just going to run and get on that council and try to make a change, which is kind of my personality. It had zero political agenda behind it. It was just sort of a let me fix my city agenda. And then it blossomed from there. But that's what drove me there, and it kept me there for 8 years.
It goes back to what it is really being a public servant, being there for the people. But you brought it from your perspective and from where you come from. And tell me a little bit about your parents. So they were they moved here. They were born in Argentina. And
Yes,
what was it like to grow up with parents that were immigrants? I mean, everybody I know that you said was in that neighborhood but still, you're coming to America, and you were their kids in this new country.
Yeah, so my parents first of all, my 4 grandparents were all born in Argentina. Just to go back one extra generation, my family escaped the pogroms of Russia in the late 1800s and got on a ship and ended up in Argentina. About 15 years later, from my mother's side, family that had gone from Russia to Poland. My great-grandmother was picked up by this gentleman. They got married and they moved to Argentina. He said he had a big business. This was about 1910. His big business was the local print shop for the Jewish newspaper. So it wasn't much of a big business, but he was a good-looking guy and a smooth talker, and he got her to come.
Smooth talker, yeah.
But look, he saved her from certain death, because everyone knows World War II and the Holocaust happened shortly thereafter, a couple of decades thereafter. So that's how my family got to Argentina. Most people in our country don't know, because we're for some reason not very educated. All of us, the global we here in the U.S., on South America, for some reason it's missed in lots of educational systems here. But there was a military coup in Argentina from about 1970 to the early 80s. And in that time, the military, the government would, quote, disappear young people. That's the term that they would use, obviously, in Spanish. They would pick up people that they thought were against their government, and they would disappear. Turns out, by the way, the evidence came out years later, they would get thrown off of airplanes with weights on them and thrown into the ocean. So terrible, by the thousands. My parents both separately escaped that. You can leave. They just didn't have an opportunity. My father had just finished medical school, and he decided to come to the United States So he came to Miami, and my mom had her best friend was kidnapped, and she, got very nervous and came to move to an aunt's house in Miami. And that was in the late 70s. My sister and I were born in 79 and 80, respectively, here in South Florida. Moved to DC. My father was doing his medical residency there. I moved back in 1983, back here to South Florida, to Surfside, just down the street from where I'm sitting now. Being an immigrant was all I knew. It means having strong connections to Argentina. We would go every summer to Argentina. And my parents are obviously both Jewish. And so being in the Jewish community in Argentina is particularly Zionist, proud of their Judaism, not very practicing, but you send your kids to Jewish day school. That's like a given, no matter what, we didn't even observe any of the rituals or the laws, but we went to a religious Jewish day school because that's just what Latin Jews do. So that was really what my upbringing was. Argentina in the summers to visit my, dozen cousins that were there and grandmothers, and coming back here during the year. And then there was sort of where we always had one foot in and one foot out, but my parents always loved this country and spoke about the opportunities that they had here and how they were able to build their lives here from nothing to a really successful home.
So thank you for sharing that. I think it was like you just gave a little history lesson of what happened in Argentina and why people left and the tragedy of the people that were killed for many years. You also talked about going to Jewish day school, which I get. You come to a new country and your parents want to put you in a place that felt comfortable. Can you talk a little bit about a teacher or somebody in the administration that looked at you and said, this Gabe, he's going to be someone, and I see him, and gave you inspiration and extra support that to this day you carry that with you?
It's interesting. No one's ever asked me that question. I'm terrible with names, although I have a few in my mind. There's absolutely were many teachers throughout my life that made an impact on my life. Interesting. When I was young, I'd be diagnosed with ADHD. Back then, I got tested and they said I'm fine. But sort of that type of upbringing, very hyperactive, was involved in sports and music. I played every sport that they had at the Jewish day school, which was basketball and soccer. And I had a band and I sang, and I was sort of out there, which means academics were not really my strong suit. So you kind of, lots of the traditional teachers would just put you down and put you in a box, but absolutely had several teachers. An English teacher comes to mind, Mr. Sorolnik, Mr. C, still there, by the way, which is incredible. This so many years later, just immediately made me love writing and reading, and really understood the way I thought and the way I looked at the world. And by the way, I had a big moment going into 11th grade where I kind of turned on my academics and realized that if I don't, I won't be able to do what I want in this world. And I thought that was important. So I kind of had a big switch. And then even in college, I haven't thought of this in so long. My freshman year at University of Michigan, I was required to take, to get into some dorm program, which is the way in Michigan you get the dorms that you want. I had to take a class, and the class was on diversity. And we had this teacher who was from the South, and I can't remember his name. He was from South Carolina, and he was from the segregated South. And he came from a family that was wildly racist, and he ended up flipping and being part of the civil rights movement, much to his family's chagrin, until they found out, and then all came along. And what was interesting then, which really had an impact on my life, is we had to sit around of people from all colors and stripes and just share. And remember, back then, we're talking about 25 years ago or more, in the late 90s, the idea was diversity, which was everyone comes with their own different backgrounds, and they stand on who they are and they just share. But nobody's trying to convince anybody. There was none of this, and we can get into it or not, the intersectionality kind of stuff where everything was kind of getting got mishmash, and in my perspective, went overboard from a societal perspective. This was like, you are who you are. Okay, I'm a Jewish guy from parents from Latin America, proud of my heritage, and this is how I approach life. And someone else said, I'm a guy from South Carolina, and this is where I'm from. Someone was from New York, someone was from here, different races and religions. And it had a big impact on my life, because I despite the fact that these days it's so hard to talk to people, I love talking to people I don't agree with. I love learning from other people's perspectives. I think it strengthens who I am. So those were two different examples of people who really made a difference, teachers who really made a difference in my life.
You have now 5 girls, and your wife and you are busy raising these kids. What is the best part of being a father, and what is one of the hardest things about being a father?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is there's no handbook. You have 5 kids. A big family means there's a lot of joy, a lot of dramas because I've got 5 girls. There is no bad part. I thought you were going to ask, so what's the bad part? There really is none. The joys of parenthood, it sounds cheesy until you live them. I mean, just this incredible experience every single day. My house is really just full of energy. And I hope you can come one day over to my house. You'll see what I'm talking about. Just especially an all girls house, I think there's a special energy to a house like that. The most beautiful part of it is watching them, especially the older ones, but really even the younger ones, make their own decisions. Because you think you're teaching them, you think they're not listening. This is one thing I'm seeing a lot. I hope they don't hear this, but my teenage girls, I've got 2 teenagers, they act like they don't listen to anything we say. And then we hear them saying the same things that we said to them on like important issues to their friends or in conversation with other people. And my wife and I look at each other like, I guess they listen. So those are these little moments that are joyous. And then seeing them make big decisions that you're proud of that they made on their own. Those are always incredible moments.
And you said that, like, yeah, I don't think there's anything, I would never ask what's the worst, because I think that being a parent is like a blessing. But what is the hardest part? Because sometimes it is hard, especially with 5 kids and with work and with life.
I'll tell you the hardest part for me is the balance of pushing too hard or not, right? You always want to correct. You always want to teach. Someone once told me your kid's going to have hundreds of friends, but they're only going to have one father, right? And that really stuck with me. And so I'm very close to all of my girls, but my goal is not to be their friend. It's to be their dad, which means to be there for them, to be an example, to teach them, to educate them, to discipline them when they have to be disciplined. The balance is letting them live and letting them grow without being too much over them. I struggle with that sometimes, and I catch myself like, it's okay. They're not eating their food today. Just let it be. It's not a big deal. Or they're sloppy, or they didn't clean their rooms, or whatever it is. Just letting them be. For me, maybe that's what was in my mind this morning after breakfast in our house today, but that's something that comes up a lot.
And talk about, if you would, like, what your wife puts up with, what she does, because she's busy also. She's raising the kids, but she's also there to support what you've been, and being a mayor and being a business person and all the work you do. And you also are a podcast host of The Standpoint with Gabe Groisman. And like, what does she do with all of your, we'll say in Yiddish, mishugas, like all your crazy stuff?
So, what's interesting is Paula Abdul got it right when she said opposites attract for the 90s reference. We each have our own things that we like to do. I'm more public. She's more private. We've been together forever. We've been married 21 years. We're together a year before that. We've known each other our whole lives too. So we're incredibly close. She wouldn't do the things I do. She wouldn't want to. She'd be amazing at them, but that's not what she does. She has her own business, by the way. She has Camp Lisa Travels. Everyone can follow her. She's got a great travel concierge business.
Oh, wow.
Works from home, but has a staff, works with, really has a nice business that she's put together over the years. But look, we have different approaches to parenting, but our big pictures are aligned. And I think that one thing I got right when I was, 22 years old and proposed to my wife 22 years ago was I said, look, I don't know every little thing about you, but I know all the big things. And all the big things are aligned. The things we care about, our values, the way we want to live our lives, the way we want to raise our families. And that's been constant. I mean, it's been absolutely constant. Despite people say, oh, you change over the years. I'm like, yeah, you change, you grow up, right? But the core of who you are, it shouldn't change. And that's been the same for both of us.
I think that's a really well said, the values, that you have those things, because that's your North Star. The other things you have that can always be nuanced. What is the best advice you've ever received and the worst advice you've ever received?
So it's interesting. I have a hard time taking advice from people. So that's the first thing. My wife will tell me all the time, what's your plan? Give me a plan. What's the 10-year plan? I always tinker with politics. Are you going to go back in? What's the plan? And people always think I'm being coy, but my mind doesn't work that way. I just try to take the next best step. I think of sort of like, if you watch these documentaries of guys free climbing the sides of a mountain, they'll say they can't think of how to get to the top of the mountain because it would be overwhelming. They just think of where to put their hand next. And that's sort of how I try to look at life. As far as advice goes, lots of good advice from my parents, from my rabbi, who I'm very close to as well. If we're talking about relationships, my rabbi's wife, Rebbitzin, for those who don't know the term, it means the rabbi's wife, often says something that resonates a lot with me, which is, when you're talking about your marriage or your relationships, is that remember that love is a verb. Right? Just saying you love someone doesn't mean anything. You have to actually take action to love somebody, right? You have to do the right things and do things for them all the time. That's something I think about a lot in my relationship. And, that's really it. And on a practical perspective, is maybe not as sexy, but, on a real practical perspective, my first year as a lawyer, I was litigating, and now a close friend of mine, but my big boss at the moment, Bob Burlington, came to me and said, "You haven't left the office basically in a couple months." I'm like, yeah, I'm working hard here. And he says, "Well, I need you to join an organization and become the chair of it." I'm like, I don't have time for this. I've got a baby at home, a young wife at home. I got to work. I have to, you're at a high level, high stress litigation boutique. You're working all the time. You're in court all the time. And he said, "Yeah, you'll figure it out, but you need to be a member of the community." And I said, "Fine, but why do I have to be the chair of anything?" And he said to me, "Well, first of all, no one remembers people on the board. They only remember the chair. And second of all, make sure you do something because your time is so valuable that you care about. Don't worry about networking. That's going to happen on its own. Only spend time doing something valuable. If after 10 years, all you've done is come to work and gone home, you'll never be happy. You need to make sure you spend your time out in the community and actually making a difference." And that's advice I give to young people all the time as well. And I've taken it maybe too far.
No, I love that. And I usually ask people what's the advice they give, and you just gave it, which is beautiful. Okay, so now we're going to do my rapid questions, and they're just fun questions to get to know Gabe. And here we go. Favorite sound?
The guitar.
Okay. Do you play guitar?
I do.
Okay. Favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite scent or smell?
Burnt wood, like a campfire.
Wow, that's a good one. I've not heard that one. That's beautiful. Who is your biggest cheerleader?
Yeah, depends on the day. Really, probably my mother. Probably by far my mother.
Shout out for your mom.
Yeah, she's a typical Jewish mother in the best of ways. Very, very excited about everything I do.
And do your parents live near you?
Yeah, about a 10-minute drive away.
Favorite sports teams?
University of Michigan and all the Miami teams, Miami Dolphins and Miami Heat.
Is your family cat or dog? What do you have?
Oh, only dogs.
What are the dogs' names?
But my dog is Mello. Yes, I grew up with German Shepherds. I landed somehow with a mutt. I saved my little brother-in-law. His roommate had rescued a dog at the pound while we were in line for this beautiful, like, Beurre Blanc, they call them the White Shepherds. And we had put a deposit down and everything. And this kid called me, a young guy calls me and said, "I don't know why I rescued this dog from the pound. We were walking around with some friends and some girls, and we just did it. And I don't know what to do with this puppy in my apartment." And I said, "I'll take the puppy." So instead of getting a beautiful white shepherd, we have this amazing dog who's just a street mutt, who's the sweetheart of a dog. But they named him after Carmelo Anthony, which is very random. But we figured, why change his name? It was funny.
Like it.
And a high energy dog, you might as well call him Mello. It's aspirational.
Just so people know, Carmelo Anthony, basketball player, just to put that out there.
And not one that I particularly like, by the way. Just happens to be his name.
But a very good player.
Yes, very good.
Okay, favorite meal?
I'm Argentinian, so I'm very, very classic. Steak with chimichurri and some rice or potatoes on the side.
Okay, good. And favorite dessert?
Dark chocolate. Anything dark and bitter.
You play guitar, so do you have a certain kind of music that you play when you play guitar?
Sure. So I play guitar and piano, and I sing, and music's a huge part of my life. I did it full time for a little bit when I was younger, and now I just do it for fun with friends and family. But what kind of music? It's always evolving. Now I'm in this phase where if you look at my Spotify list, looking backwards, it's country music and Israeli music. So it's very, very funny mix of music, but that's what I'm into these days. I listened to rock for a long time, classic rock, went through a jazz and blues phase. But my musical tastes are always kind of floating around. I was kind of hungry for songwriting again, and I had missed that, and it took me to country music. Not like pop country music, but country music nonetheless, and it's been a fun ride.
What is your favorite household chore?
It seems typical. I have two things. One, cooking. I love to cook. Whenever I have time, I cook as much as I can, and anything outdoors. I just love being outdoors. My wife hates it, so it's perfect. And I'm in charge of the outdoors in the house, and that's about it. We need a big renovation now, so it's on me. But I like to do a lot of those projects myself and keep the outdoors a place that call me to kind of go outside and get some fresh air away from the stress that's usually inside.
One more is, what is Gabe's superpower?
I think I have the ability to connect to people on a personal level, all kinds of people. I love finding on a personal level common ground with people. Is the more distant that they seem, the more eager I am to try to find that, because I just think it's so interesting to learn about somebody else and try to relate to them and try to connect with them. So if that counts as a superpower, I think that would probably be it.
First, I think that is a superpower, and I think it's a power and it's a talent, and it's so important, more so than ever right now. That's, one of the reasons for this podcast. And I started this 2 years ago because I felt like we needed to have tough conversations. We needed to meet people that we thought were the other or different. So and there's something a little scary about it, but there's also something really exciting about it, which is, like you said, we're so different. Like, what can we find that brings us together? Or what can we find that has some sort of a connection?
It's just, now from my perspective of like, I like being around people I disagree with. Of course, I have my red lines of things, right? If you wish death upon me, I have no interest in being around you. If you wish death upon the state of Israel, which is so important to me and of who I am as a person, I have no interest in being around you. Or if you want to destroy our country where we live in and have our opportunities, I guess those are the lines. Everything else, I'd love to sit and talk. And of course, I was talking to a mutual friend that we have earlier today, and saying like, I love having conversations with people I don't agree with, even on issues or not issues. Like, it's not a thing. It's actually makes life more interesting to have those discussions. But somehow in our society today, it seems like there's a lot of that sort of cancel culture and the veto, the heckler's veto, which people that don't know the term, it's actually a legal term. It became a legal term, but it's not a good proper use of the First Amendment to shout someone down so they can't speak. You're giving a veto as a heckler, right? You're heckling them down. Like, that's just so ridiculous, right? You should be able to have a conversation. And by the way, you should also not always have to have a conversation. I have family members that I look at them and I say, please, let's not talk about politics. I love you. I don't have to convince you. You don't have to convince me. Let's talk about our kids. And not that we have to ignore it, but some people get too heated and don't kind of, I don't say don't know because it sounds condescending, but don't really, they don't get to the place where they can just talk about the issues without being personal. So I'm like, all right, let's just not talk about the issues, right? We're not on the floor in the Senate. Like, it's fine. We can just talk about other things. I think we may think similarly in the sense that something that bothers me very much in society today, and I hope as a whole we can get over it.
Well, that's part of this, which is people may disagree with you or with other of my guests, but if they hear about who you are as a human, that isn't something they can disagree with. And I think that we have to start with that as what connects us and what keeps us together, which is the basic humanity of all of us. And there are bottom lines and, things that you don't cross. But for the most part, and I found in the last 2 years that for the most part, there's a lot more that bonds us than separates us. My last question, which I've asked everybody, and I love the answers. They're very different. But what does joy mean to you? What brings you joy? And if you have joy, how do you share that with others?
It's an interesting question. Nothing that I do publicly brings me joy. Everything I do publicly is for a purpose, right? I think I'm trying to advance a conversation in society, or if it's related to my business, or if it's related to combating anti-Semitism, which I dedicate a lot of my time to for many years, right? And I think I'm moving the needle on it. I'm always thinking about that. None of that brings me joy, despite, by the way, sometimes you get accolades for it, or, it's great. It gives you energy to move forward, but it's not joy. For me, joy literally only comes from my family. It's kind of where you started. From my kids. Saturday mornings is the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath, like, Shabbat, which we observe, which means we don't use electricity or our phones or our computers or our cars. And I can tell you that if you come to my house on a Friday morning, or even on a Sunday morning, and see the chaos of my breakfast room table and compare it to Saturday morning. Saturday morning, I come back from a run and my kids are sitting around the table eating cereal, no phones, no computers, everyone just talking, and nobody moves for 2 to 3 hours, just talking about their week. My wife has a whole routine that she does. Is just tell me 3 things. Tell us 3 things good that happened to you this week and 3 things that you're grateful for. Is this incredible exercise of like positivity and finding positivity even in tough times. And by the way, those questions are not always easy. I mean, think of asking that to a Jewish family the week after October 7th, right? We still ask those questions, right? Like focus, what can we focus on that's good? But those moments totally bring me joy. How do I share those with others? I don't. And that's really what makes it special, right? What makes it special is when you're out there a lot, to have those intimate moments with your family and to do it regularly, not once a year like so many people do on Thanksgiving or whatever. We do it every single week. And that's really what brings me joy.
Wow, that's great and beautiful and thoughtful. And, it kind of makes me think about, and I'll end by saying this, like, again, I talk about we are living in crazy times. If you turn on the news, and it doesn't matter which station, you just hear so much craziness. And then you think, oh my God, and it gets your heart beating and it gets you crazy. But the reason for this podcast is that moment. It's almost that Shabbat morning where it is just about connection and talking and having what brings you joy, what makes you happy, what do you do? And it's like what your conversation with your wife and your kids is, which is just connecting. Obviously, we're on a computer, so we are virtually connecting. But I just want to thank you because you've given me a lot to think about. And I hope as people will hear your story and who you are, it'll give them a lot to think about. Because at the end of the day, we all need to take a break and just be with ourselves and to close off all the noise and just have good conversations and be connected and learn. And I've learned a lot. So I want to say thank you. And I really appreciate our time together.
Thanks so much for having me. This is delightful.
Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.